the Hi all, welcome to week 3, the Dark Ages slash the Middle Ages week. Now, technically these are two pretty distinct periods that cover like a massive amount of time, but the Dark Ages, as I said in the last video, are called the Dark Ages for a reason. Now, we don't have very much from this era except for like Beowulf and the idea that Vikings were running around and conquering people and just generally getting up to no good. So we condensed the two, and this video for me, in full disclosure, is more focused on the medieval period than that of the Dark Ages. This kind of felt like the week of touring for me because first I took a London Walks tour, which are so great. They're like £8 for students, and this one was all about the Middle Ages and nuns and knights and how they were all getting up to naughtiness. Then I did a tour of the Tower of London, which I just had a ball at. If you ever go, Beefeater tour, absolute must do. They are just so fantastic and just really extraordinary men and women. And finally, our group went to Oxford, which doesn't strike me as a Middle Ages sort of thing, but it totally is. So sit back, relax, and let's start with the London Walks tour. Our walking tour had several sections. The first was about the 13 Knights of Portsoken, and if you think that sounds like a fairy tale, it basically is. King Edgar from a billion years ago said that these 13 knights could get the land that is now known as the City of London if they performed duels by land, by water, and one below ground. So naturally they did it, and that's how the City of London came to be, or at least that's how legend has it. We spent the rest of the tour looking for the St. Botolph's churches. There were originally 4 at each of the 4 gates into the City of London, but only 3 stand now. One is in Aldgate and one is in Bishopsgate, and those are where we spent the most time. I really kind of took to these churches because St. Botolph is the patron saint of travelers, and since we're all travelers, it felt really nice to be there. We also spent a lot of time staring at the Gherkin. God bless. I think that might be my favorite skyscraper in the city. And also learning about how Chaucer used to sit up above Aldgate and write about people who came by, and that may have been the inspiration for Chaucer's tales. The final bit of information we got was at the conclusion of the tour, and that was regarding Liverpool Street Station, which is a really big national rail and tube station in London. It was originally the first lunatic asylum in the country, Bedlam Lunatic Asylum. Our guide said it's still Bedlam sometimes. Hardy har. The London Walks tour itself actually felt very related to theater for me because it was a group of people, an audience, following a storyteller around the set, which was the City of London. And I thought that it was a really interesting way to get people involved in history and to perform, that walk, that tour, that history, that is theater. And I can't imagine how that would play out in the US because our history is so much shorter. But I think I want to go on more walking tours when I get back home to see how they differ. Now, going and visiting the Tower of London was probably one of the most fun things that I've done this entire time. You get a little bit of everything. You get the decadent, mind-blowing, just unquantifiable crown jewels. You get the lovely walk around with snarky Beefeater commentary about the political climate of both the UK and the US. And you get to look at the scary, creepy torture equipment that they used to use there. And fun fact, I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but very few people were actually executed in the Tower of London, and even fewer were probably tortured using the stereotypical torture devices that you would think of. Much more common were kind of devices of public humiliation, like the scold's bridle, and I will be getting to those in just a minute. We had a similarly fantastic tour at the Tower of London by a beefeater, and these are all honorably discharged members of the British Armed Forces. Ours was a medic, and he says that he is a feminist because he thinks Elizabeth I is the greatest person to have ever lived. God bless. He showed us all around the grounds, including right next door to the beefeaters' houses, actually, a memorial posted for those who were unethically beheaded at the Tower of London, and honestly, that's only like 2 or 3 people. We then moved in to the White Tower, which is where the museum is, and there we saw suits of armor that belonged to Henry VIII, compensating much, a bunch of really interesting artifacts and art made from old pieces of armor, and a couple of little torture and execution equipment bits, which terrified the crap out of me. I really enjoyed exploring this building and wandering around. Next, we went off to the Bloody Tower, which houses some of the instruments of torture I was talking about earlier that really weren't used that much. The ones that stuck out were the rack, used like so, manacles, used like so, and this device, whose name, regrettably, I did not write down, but looks remarkably painful. This one's actually never documented being used. We left by taking a look at the Trader's Gate, and bonus points, a couple weeks later, I got to try out a stock myself. Okay, with the Tower of Torture behind us, the next stop is Oxford. Now, everybody most knows this town for its famous school called Oxford University. You might have heard of it. And we did walk around there. It was gorgeous. But I'm most excited to talk to you a little bit about the architecture we saw there and some of the most famous people who've walked through this region. Welcome to Oxford. I didn't take as many pictures here as I wanted to because it was the coldest damn day in the history of mankind. The wind was blowing and I couldn't get my fingers to work. I don't have a lot of detailed historical information on any of these buildings, but a lot of them were built in the medieval era and then restored, during the Tudor or Georgian or Victorian era, which is why they look so posh and fancy and cake-like now. But it was incredible to walk through this area and think about all the amazing footsteps that have come through. We walked by a Harry Potter set, buildings out of which some of the most revolutionary rhetoric, research, and novels have come, and the crowning glory at the end was getting to have lunch at the Eagle and Child, which was J.R.R. Tolkien's favorite pub. After our wonderful pub lunch at the Eagle and Child, I had a little bit of extra time, and so I went to the Ashmolean Museum, which is an Oxford museum. Like all the beautiful, wonderful, fantastic museums in London, it is free, and I had maybe half an hour, and so I went straight to the medieval room to take a look at some things. Here's the Glossop's bridle I was telling you about. I knew it was a good choice to go into this lovely little museum. They also had the collar of terror here, which was used for prisoners, and a bunch of really delightful little medieval artifacts of some description or another. Favorites included boxes of remains, souvenirs taken by people going on pilgrimages, just like in Chaucer's tales, and tokens of love that knights used to give to maidens as a sign of chivalry. I wish I had gotten to spend more time in the Ashmolean, but I'm really, really glad that I got the time that I did. Honestly, I don't know that much about Chaucer, but it's been kind of cool to walk around all these places that he was involved with, and I've only barely touched the Canterbury Tales, but I want to go back and read them now that I have a little bit more information on the man behind them, and hearing that they're actually super funny. Like, I thought it was going to be kind of serious, pious. Boy, I was wrong. So, anyway, that is all I have for you today. I will see you next time for Tutor Week, which is my focus period. I am so excited. And until then, thank you so much for listening. Live your best lives and be good.